Okay, so we've received a few questions about dealing with childhood physical and sexual abuse, and I'd like to summarize them if that's fine with you. So Dimitra, Pascal, Laura, Swapna, Margaret, Priya, and others have been asking how we deal and heal from trauma coming from childhood abuse, how we deal with traumatic memories returning unexpectedly, either in our dreams or during therapy.
Okay, well, thank you. It's a huge problem and not sufficiently recognized or understood by many people in the healing professions. The impact of childhood sexual trauma is both psychological and physical. On the physical level, it causes or it can trigger inflammation in the body that you can measure even decades later, and that predisposes to physical illness. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but whether it's autoimmune disease or heart disease, the risk is elevated because of the inflammation and trauma causes. On the psychological level, it leads to a number of consequences. One is that it makes people feel ashamed of themselves, because children, when they're hurt, the way their minds work is that they interpret the world as centering on them. So when bad things happen, it's their fault. So that a lot of people have shame around what happened to them. They have shame around their very existence. Number one. Number two, it creates a sense of unworthiness, like I don't deserve better. So a lot of people who were sexually abused will then create situations in their lives, relationships, for example, when they're hurt over and over again because they don't believe they deserve anything better. Thirdly, the sense of trust, the sense of safety is confused, because often the person who hurt them was a person who maybe even loved them at the same time, a father or a relative or something, a grandparent. So the child's brain is confused about who's safe and who isn't. So they tend to not trust people that could be trusted, or trust people too much that should never be trusted. So the inner GPS for what is safe and secure is completely confused. There are other effects, but the biggest one of all is difficulty asking for help. So that they see their problems as purely as their own fault, and they don't know how to ask for help. Now, why is that? It doesn't matter how many people I speak to. The question I ask them is, when the sexual abuse was happening, how long did it go on for? Did it happen once? Did it go over a week? Was it months? Was it years? There's a whole range. But what is absolutely common is we ask people, for however long it was going on for, who did you speak to? And the answer is nobody. Usually the answer, I talked to my dog, or I talked to my dolls, or maybe I told my friend years later. But at the time when it was happening, they didn't ask for help from anybody. Now, that has two implications. One is, why didn't they speak to anybody? I mean, the natural impulse of any young creature, whether it's a dog or a horse or any mammal, is when they're in danger, they run to the adults for help. Same with the human child. What happened? What happened is that by the time the abuse happened, that child already learned unconsciously that they're alone, that there's no help available, that they couldn't trust the people looking after them. Maybe it was the parents that were doing the hurting, or maybe because the child got the impression that the parents were not available, too busy, too stressed, so that they shouldn't bother the parent with their issues. But the point is, they were left alone with it. And that deep sense of aloneness is one of the major aspects of the impacts of sexual trauma and the difficulty asking for help. Now, here's what, that's all the bad news, okay? But there's good news here. And the good news is that if we understand the word trauma, trauma means a wound. So the wound is not what happened to you. The wound is what happened inside you as a result of what happened to you. So the trauma, and this might be difficult for you to grasp, so just listen carefully and make sure I'm not misunderstood. The trauma was not the sexual abuse. The trauma is the wound, the psychological wounds that I just described as a result of the sexual abuse. So the sexual abuse was the traumatic event, but the trauma is the wound inside yourself of shame, of feeling alone, of not knowing who to trust, of believing you don't deserve better. Those are the wounds. So I'll give you an example. If I have a blow on the head, that's not the trauma. The trauma is the concussion. So the trauma is what happens inside me as a result of what happened to me. Why is that good news? Because if the wound is the problem that you're carrying now, that can be healed now. Mm-hmm. If the trauma was what happened to you all those years ago, that can never be fixed because it happened. It will never not have happened. But if the trauma is the wound that you sustained, it's a wound that you're carrying now in the present moment, that can be healed in the present moment. And I don't know how that's done. That's a long question. But the basic issue is to learn to accept that those reactions that you had, the shame and the difficulty trusting and the sense of aloneness and the belief that you deserve this and whatever else, those were natural responses to an unnatural circumstance. So in my book, The Myth of Normal, what I'm saying is that all these dysfunctions that we think are abnormal are actually normal responses to abnormal situations. So for example, if a woman who was sexually abused as a child keeps forming adult relationships with men who are abusive, there's nothing wrong with her fundamentally. That's a normal response to what happened. And so the main thing about healing is to know that there's fundamentally nothing wrong with you, and that your dysfunctions and your disabilities or your problems in life, the challenges, are only to be expected based on what happened to you. And you can actually learn to accept yourself in the present. And when you learn to accept yourself in the present, you're healing the trauma. So it begins with a lot of self-compassion, a lot of self-acceptance. And that's where therapy can come in, among other modalities. But that's basically it. So the wound is not what happened to you. It's what happened inside you. It's what still lives inside you. And because it's in the present, we can be healing in the present, which also means that just focusing on what happened in the past is not good enough. It's important to understand what happened, and it's helpful, but it's not sufficient. It's what's going on right now that has to be understood in the present moment. And finally, a lot of people have healed from sexual trauma. It's totally doable for everybody.
It's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much. Thank you. So second question we have, it's from, it's summarized from Andrea Constantinos and Loredana. How can we heal ourselves in order to best parent our children and stop generational trauma from spreading further? How can I make sure I will not pass my traumas, although treated to my children? How to heal the trauma when having children and avoid pulling them into the battle?
Well, here's the good news. anybody who's asking that question is already taking a step forward. Because as soon as you're aware of that transgenerational transmission of trauma, and as soon as you're asking, how can I protect my children? You've asked the right question, because that means you're going to start your healing process, which your parents probably never did. In other words, you're already giving your kids something that you never got. So just by raising that question, you're taking a major step forward. Now, that's point number one. Point number two, when people say, I'm worried about screwing up my kids, you know what I say to them? I say to them, don't worry about it. Of course you will. We all do, you know. That's not the end of the world. It's just how it happens. We're not perfect, are we? You know. Thirdly, the great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, who died just 2.5 years ago or so, he said that the greatest gift parents can give to their children is their own happiness. So the biggest gift you can give to your kids is not what you do for them, but who you are for them. And the more you can resolve and work on your own trauma, and by the way, I have good news and bad news, or bad news and good news. Let's start with the bad news. When you find a life partner, a spouse with whom you're going to have children, you'll always find somebody exactly the same level of traumatic wounding that you're at. I mean, absolutely exactly. It's like water finding its own level. So that means that to the extent that you're traumatized, so is your partner. And to the extent that you're healed, so is your partner. That means that two people who are carrying various degrees of trauma are going to enter into a relationship with each other. They need to recognize that. The good news is that the marriage relationship or any kind of long-term relationship can be a wonderful ground for healing the trauma. So as long as people realize that, they're way ahead of the game. Now, thirdly, or if I don't know, thirdly or fourthly, parenting is not a set of how-tos. It's not a set of behaviors. It's not a set of skills. You know what it is? It's a relationship. Nobody teaches a mother bear how to be a mother bear. But because of the relationship that she had with her mother, she knows how to parent. It's not a skill. It's a relationship. So you need to put your relationship with the child at the forefront of everything else. Not what do I do and how do I do it, but who am I for that child? Can I offer them unconditional loving acceptance? And that'll depend to what extent you have healed your own wounds or you're aware of your own wounds. Now, all of these subjects, I don't mean to advertise myself, but all of these subjects are discussed in various of my books. Those that are interested in parenting particularly will want to read Hold On to Your Kids, which has been published in many languages, including a new edition coming up just in a couple of days, actually. Also my book, The Myth of Normal, other books. But the point is, don't look to books, look to your own healing, and look to the relationship, and look to your own happiness. And the more you can work on yourself, and the more you can find yourself and your true joy in life, the more assured you are that you're protecting your children.
That's amazing, beautiful. And as a parent myself, I think that's just incredible. Thank you so much. Another question we have from Martine. Can someone else, like a grandparent or teacher, apart from the major caretakers, play a significant role in developing secure attachment in the infant? Will it prevent the infant from having attachment trauma?
I just want to understand the question. Is this if the parent is not available or when the parent is available?
It doesn't say here on the question. So basically
right.
just asking, so it's not clear.
Okay, fair enough. So not only could other adults play a role, they should. as the child grows, particularly. Now, if you actually look at how human beings evolved as a species until very short time ago, we lived in groups. We lived in small band hunter-gatherer groups where children were around all kinds of adults the whole day. From the moment they were born till their adolescents and adults, they lived in a group setting where not only the biological mom or dad were the designated caregivers, all the adults were. So the child had healthy attachments to multiple adult caregivers. And this is the case in a lot of indigenous societies to this day. So the idea of a mom and dad, or a mom or dad, or dad and dad, or mom and mom, but living in a small bungalow or apartment with kids and isolated, is a completely modern phenomenon. It's very unnatural. So the child should have other attachments to other healthy, nurturing adults. As long as those attachments don't compete with one another and support one another, it's all good. So when a kid goes to a daycare center, if they have to, because their parents have to work, then that daycare center teacher or provider needs to become an attachment figure in the child's life that is in alliance with the parent. So it's like the parent passes the attachment baton onto the daycare worker or the teacher. And this needs to go on through adolescence. So children need healthy adult attachments outside the biological framework. As long as those attachments are allied with each other, then there's no problem. The problem comes in is if attachments compete with one another. This is what happens in a divorce sometimes. In a hostile divorce, the parents are competing for the child's attachment. Now, the child's brain is in an impossible position because the child's brain can't handle competing primary attachments. Or, as again in the book, Hold On to Your Kids, we point out, children in our society get too early hooked into and connected with and enmeshed in the peer group. And now the peer attachment competes with the adult attachment, and the brain can't handle the competing primary attachments. And very often the parents lose out. So it's really important for kids, well, for adults, to maintain their centrality in a child's attachment universe, shared with other supportive adults. And ideally, if the parents do have to get divorced, they will understand that the one thing they should not compete for with each other is for the child's attachment, that they still need to support each other, if that's at all possible. Sometimes it isn't.
Yes. Perfect, thank you. And another question from Marian Zara. How can we effectively support a loved one or a patient in acknowledging and addressing their addiction when they resistance to the idea?
Well, there's a short answer and a bit of a longer answer. I'll give you the short answer first. You can't. As long as they're resistant to the idea, you're trying to do the impossible. And it's very simple. Anybody can try this with me right now. You can take your left hand and your right hand. You can take your right hand and push as hard as you can with the right hand. What's the left hand going to do? Automatically, it's going to resist. So as soon as people feel any pushing, there's an automatic resistance. So as long as they're in resistance mode, you can't. And I'd have to ask you why you're even trying. I mean, I know you care about the other person and you wish they would heal, but why are you trying to do the impossible? What need do you have that they should heal? Because if you have a need that they should heal, then you're using them so that you can feel better. And they're going to resist that. So the short answer is you can't. The long answer is if you change your approach so that you're not pushing them, you're not forcing them, you're not trying to convince them, cajole them, beg them, influence them, teach them, if you can just be for them, be there for them, and say, look, I understand that your addiction is your attempt to deal with whatever pain or issues you have in your life. And I'm not judging you for that. And I can totally accept that that's how it is for you. But if you want help, I'm happy to provide it. And if you don't, I totally respect your choice. Or if you're a family member, you might even go further. And you might say, your addiction is a sign of pain. That pain doesn't just belong to you. It belongs to the whole family. It didn't start with you. It's multi-generational. You're just a sensitive one who's feeling the pain more and is trying to run away from it. But your addiction is a sign that there's something in the family system that is carrying a lot of suffering. So therefore, your healing is our healing. And we're going to embark on that healing path. We invite you to join us, but we're going to do it regardless of whether you join us or not. Let me accept that you may not. That may possibly, if you don't try and coerce people emotionally, if you don't need them to be any different, if you can accept where they're at and talk to them humanely, that may help to diminish the resistance. But as long as the resistance is there, don't push against it.
Thank you. Another question: in the context of your work on healing and reconciliation with the past, what advice would you give to someone dealing with the dual challenge of mourning a recent deceased parent who caused significant emotional trauma, while also navigating in the ongoing mental health struggles?
Yeah. You know, there's that, my son and I, Daniel and I, are just writing a new book together, just starting to work on it. It's called Hello Again, a fresh start for parents and adult children. And very often the question comes up is, how do you have a relationship with the parents that hurt you? And especially, what do you do, or in particular, what do you do in a case where the parent has died and there's no even any chance of working it out? Well, this is where mixed feelings come into it. When I say mixed feelings, I mean in a very positive sense. You need to be able to validate and hold mixed feelings. One is, you might love that parent, but at the same time, you might be enraged at that parent. Being angry at the parent and loving them are not contradictory. So you can give yourself permission to feel both of those emotions. Yeah, I hate what they did to me. And I've really suffered because of what happened to me. And I love them and I miss them. If you do, I mean, there's no obligation on your part to mourn or grieve or love the parent. But if you genuinely do, and many people do, even after the parent really hurt them, then you just feel that. Allow yourself to feel the grief, allow yourself to feel the love, and allow yourself to feel the anger and the rage at the same time. And the healing here is being able to hold both of those emotions at the same time. Now, at some point, as you heal, forgiveness might enter the picture, in that you start to understand why they did it or what happened to them that they made them behave that way. That's not obligatory. You don't have to forgive anything. I never say to people, you should forgive. There's no should. It either happens or it doesn't, but it may come. For now, just accept that both your mourning and your grief and your anger and your resentment, they're all totally natural. And that healing doesn't depend on the parent. Healing means wholeness. That wholeness, or the capacity for it, is within you. It doesn't depend on whether or not the parent is there to acknowledge their role, or whether or not they've died so they can't even conceivably apologize or recognize anything. Your healing does not depend on them. Your wounding happened at their hands, but your healing will happen at your own hands. Doesn't depend on them. You're not dependent on them anymore.
Thank you. Just make sure I don't repeat the same question. How can we heal from trauma when we remain in contact with the person responsible for it, such as a family member who committed rape? What approaches can support someone in this complex and painful situation?
Let me tell you something. My son Daniel, with whom I wrote The Myth of Normal, and with whom I'm writing the new book for parents and adult kids, until very recently, still had some very strong physiological reactions when he entered our home as an adult. And he's in his 40s. And he wasn't abused in any sense of the word. I did hit him once. Wish I hadn't, but I did when he was 3 years old. But the body, as Bessel van der Kolk says in the title of his book, the body keeps the score. So when Daniel entered the parental home, decades later, the insecurity and just the sense of lack of safety, his nervous system was wired for it, and it still got triggered. That's totally natural. Now, his decision at some point was, for a while, not to be in contact with us. Or when he does come to Vancouver, not necessarily stay at our house. And we have a great relationship, my son and I now, and his mother and him. So if you were raped by somebody, your nervous system is going to go into full alarm mode anytime you're near them, either into full alarm mode or freeze mode. Those are the two ways that, the body reacts. Or it might go into rage mode, the fight mode. The question I have for you, whoever asked that question, is, do you have to be around that person? Can you make a decision to take distance, at least for a while, until you're more comfortable and confident in yourself, or maybe forever? Now, that decision may carry some risks. The risk being is that other people in the family won't like it, that you'll alienate people. You have to decide what's more important, your own health or your contact with the family. I can't dictate for you what you should decide. What I can tell you is that may be the choice you have to make, is taking distance for as long as you need to. They may or may not understand it, but what they understand is not important. Your healing is what's important. But you're going to feel some pain if you lose contact with them. Or you can have the pain of suppressing yourself and being around this person. And the question is, which pain would you rather have? There might not be a pain-free option. Now, my bias is that choosing yourself, even if it means losing contact, is always better in the long term. That's my bias. But I'm not in your position. I don't have to deal with what you might have to deal with. So it's your decision. But again, the choice that you might be facing is, which pain would I rather have? The pain of self-suppression and an agitated or frozen nervous system, or the pain of separation?
Perfect, thank you. Another question, in your experience, what strategies are effective in managing deep-seated anger and frustration, and how can individuals work through these intense emotions to find peace?
Well, I really would have to know much more about the particular circumstances that gave rise to that question. In other words, who's the anger with? Is it with your spouse? Or is it with your deceased parent? Or is it with a friend? Or is it just a lot of anger that you're carrying that's not specific to anybody? So I can't really give you an answer to that one, except to tell you something very in general, which is that that kind of anger always has pain underneath it. So you need to explore what's the pain. And anger is sometimes, there's such a thing as healthy anger. Just that's, you're not carrying it around. It's not like it's with you all the time. But if somebody invades your boundaries inappropriately, either physically or verbally or emotionally, it's a good idea to be angry. That's not a good idea. It's a healthy response to be angry. It's not an idea. It's a response. Get out. Don't come near me. Don't talk to me that way. That's healthy anger. Nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's necessary. Now, sometimes people that have a lot of suppressed anger are carrying a lot of anger that they haven't expressed. They haven't set boundaries. So people stepped all over them and now they carry this anger inside them. But the problem is they didn't have the healthy anger. If they had the healthy anger, they might not need the unhealthy anger. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that when you were very young, you weren't permitted to be angry, even though anger is a very natural emotion in a 1.5, 2, 3, 4-year-old. And as long as the parents can accept it and validate it and be with it, there's no problem. But if that wasn't permitted to you, then you have a huge cauldron, like a volcano of rage inside you that's just looking to be expressed, and you never know when it's going to blow up. That kind of anger always has a lot of pain behind it. So rather than worrying about the anger, let's explore the pain that's driving it. So it's not a matter of managing anger. It's a matter of understanding the source of it. And for that, you might need some therapeutic help. And also accepting that anger that you have, as I said before, is a perfectly normal response to something that's not normal, to something that should never have happened in the first place.
You. Another question is, when there is no clear narrative or memory of specific traumatic events, but there is an acknowledgement that trauma has happened, how can somebody proceed with the healing? What approaches can be taken to move forward to find closure or peace without having a detailed understanding of the past events?
Okay. Well, so remember what I said. Trauma is not what happened in the past. Trauma is what the wound that you're carrying now. So in a case like that, I would just engage with the person on how does the trauma show up in your life daily today, and how do we deal with it today? Never mind what happened. We know something happened. We don't know exactly what happened. So what? The point is the trauma is showing up today. The wound is aching today. The wound is festering today. We can deal with that, even knowing. It's like saying, I come to you with a physical wound. And you say to me, well, we can't heal the physical wound until you tell me exactly what kind of animal, what kind of bug bit you, and what was the color of it, and how many wings did it have, and did it happen at 3 a.m, or was it 3:30? I mean, no, we just have to look after the wound, right? So that's the first point. The second point is, I don't usually find it that difficult to find the sources of the wound, because they'll manifest every day. So that, for example, you're going to get triggered. That response to the triggering will tell you a lot about the kind of wound that you sustained. We could do an exercise about that, Patricia, if you wanted to demonstrate this for the folks, or we can just go on to the next, or we can go on to the next question. But it's not that difficult. No. Okay, all right.
It's fine.
Do you ever get upset?
Yes.
Okay. Are you willing to share some recent episode when you're upset with somebody in your life. I don't care whether it was your spouse, your friend, the bus driver, your child. It doesn't matter. Just some upset that later on you wondered what the heck was going on here.
Yes, sometimes even just on a normal conversation, just having some feeling irritated without really knowing exactly why certain conversation would trigger something.
Okay. So can you tell me what happened? Who said what?
Just trying to think of any specific examples.
I do need a, if you don't have a specific example, that's great. We can go on to the next question. But for this exercise, I do need a specific example.
Sometimes I'm just aware, like with my partner, I'm aware that some things that trigger me come from my parents' relationship.
I need something specific.
Okay.
He,
Oh my God, I can't think of anything.
that they said such and such, and you know, like what happened?
Can't think of anything specific now. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. Well, then let's let it go for now. If something occurs to you afterwards, you can always come back to me and say, "Oh
Yes.
yeah, okay, all right." Then,
Okay. All right.
but what I'm saying is that inside that being triggered, there's a story of some traumatic impact.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
in other words, I can tell from the present what happened in the past. Okay.
Yes. So, and I can actually relate a lot of the things from my parents' relationship, but then, yeah, it's just very, I can't really think of anything specific now, but it's things that come up like every now and then.
That's all right.
Thank
Then we'll take
you.
the then we'll take the next question.
Yes. So, next question. How do I cope with the guilt and shame of my children suffering due to an abusive partner? And how can I help with their own battles with alcohol, which may have come from my addiction? And what can I do to heal and assist them in their healing journey?
So I take it that you're talking about adult children here. These are
Yes.
these
Yes,
adult,
from what I understand, yes.
yeah. So these adult children, when they were children, they lived in a home where there was one partner was abusing the other, or one partner may have been addicted, or both.
Yes, I think it just refers about the question is about how to deal. There's two questions in one: how to deal with guilt and shame of my
Yeah,
children suffering due to an abusive partner, and then I believe that due to that abuse, then the children themselves have battles with alcohol.
yeah. So
Which may come from my addiction. So I think the person asking has had an addiction that has passed on to the children, but also there's the question about how to deal with the guilt of dealing with also the abusive partner.
yeah. So I'm assuming that what we don't know is, was the abusive partner abusive towards the person who's asking the question, or were they abusive towards the children? But it doesn't matter. Okay. How do you deal with the guilt and shame of it? Well, let's make a distinction. There's a difference between healthy remorse, which says, I was wrong. I wish it hadn't happened that way. I wish I had been different. That's healthy remorse. It's impossible. It's almost impossible to be a parent and not have some healthy remorse looking back. Because there's always things we could have done better, and there's always things we could have avoided had we been different people. But we weren't a different people. We were who we were. So when it comes to guilt and shame, what I always say to people is, tell me, what morning did you decide to screw up your kids? Was it Saturday morning, or was it Friday afternoon? Like, when, you know, in other words, it wasn't a conscious decision on your part. If you were in a relationship where there was an abusive partner, whether that partner was abusive towards you or towards the kids or both, you didn't choose it consciously. You know what I said earlier? That we always find partners that are at the same level of wounding that we're at.
Mhm.
The only reason you were in that relationship is because you were wounded and you chose somebody also wounded. But when I say chose, I put that in quotation marks because there's no conscious choice in the matter. It's totally unconscious. So on any conscious level, you never chose to be in that relationship. You stayed in it only because stuff had happened to you that in a certain sense made you emotionally deaf, emotionally blind, and helpless. Now, you never chose what happened to you as a child, did you? Whatever happened to you that made you deaf and blind, emotionally speaking, whatever happened to you that made you passive and helpless, you didn't choose that. You weren't born that way and you didn't choose it. Those were circumstances that occurred to you as a result of no conscious decision on your part. Now, if there's no conscious decision, then there's no reason for guilt. That's the first point. The second point is that guilt that you're feeling, if I was talking to you, and if I would ask you, as I have thousands of times, I've asked people, tell me when in your life did you not feel guilty? They say, I've always felt guilty all my life. In other words, the guilt started long before you were children. And the guilt started because something happened to you in childhood. So your guilt has nothing to do with your kids. That's the second point. Remorse does. Yeah, I wish I'd been a different father. I wish I hadn't been a workaholic. I wish my marriage relationship at that time had been peaceful rather than very volatile. There's all kinds of things I wish for. And believe me, I did carry a lot of guilt for years, and that's a heavy burden to carry. I'm so glad to be free of it. But any parent whose adult children are struggling, it's almost inevitable, but that doesn't make it right, doesn't make it accurate. The next point is you're doing your kids no favor when you're looking at them through eyes of guilt, because they don't want to be seen as your mistakes. They don't want to be seen as your fault. They don't want to be seen as your victims. They want to be recognized for the people that they are in their own right. And when you're looking at them through the eyes of guilt, you're not seeing them. You're just seeing yourself in your guilt. Guilt is rather narcissistic that way. We don't see the other person, we see ourselves. Mm-hmm. The next point is that the more guilty you feel, the more you try and fix them so that you don't have to feel the guilt. Now, it's not their job to be fixed, so you don't have to feel guilty. That's your problem, not theirs. The next point is, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right, that their addictions, whatever it is too, has a lot to do, has everything to do with what happened to them in your home when they were smaller, with the abuse and with your own addiction, whatever that was. For sure, that's true. But the healing is on them at this point. You can't heal them. What you can do is to work on your own healing so that you can approach them as a supportive parent who doesn't need them to be any different than the way they are. And also as a supportive parent, if you do your own healing, then you'll recognize the healing capacity that's inherent in them. And so you won't be looking at them through the eyes of guilt, you'll be looking at them through the eyes of possibility. And you won't be pushing them, forcing them, demanding, begging, hoping, cajoling. Like I said earlier, that's on them. So the more you can get out of their way as a guilty parent, and the more you can be present as a loving parent who just wants the best for them, but is not going to be interfering and is working on your own stuff, the more that'll give them space to engage in their own healing.
Perfect, thank you. Another question we have is how to deal with self-sabotage when we feel like we don't deserve love or something because of past traumas.
Well, I'd want to know what people mean by self-sabotage, because I don't particularly accept that term. If somebody engages in behaviors that are harmful, that doesn't mean they're trying to sabotage themselves. I mean, if I suffer and go out drinking, that'll have a negative effect on me. But it doesn't mean I'm setting up to sabotage myself. I'm actually setting up to soothe my pain, to numb my pain. So you might want to re-language it. You know, it's true that you might be engaging in behaviors that are harmful to you, but self-sabotage, I don't think that's the intention. That's the first point. The second point is you said, or the questioner said, when I don't feel I deserve any better, was that the language in that question? Yeah. Well, I don't deserve better is not a feeling. Okay, that's the first thing.
It says I don't deserve love or something because of
Yeah,
past
so
choices.
that when I feel I don't deserve love, that's what they said. Okay, that's not a feeling. Feelings are I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm sad, I'm angry. Those are feelings. I don't deserve love is not a feeling. It's a belief. And the question is, how did you get that belief? No, I can ask you, what do you feel when you believe you don't deserve love? I feel lonely, I feel ashamed, whatever. Those are the feelings. But I don't deserve love is not a feeling, it's a belief. And like any belief, it came from somewhere. You weren't born with it. I guarantee you, you were not born with it. In fact, you know that you weren't because you said it was owing to trauma. Well, first of all, recognize, remember what I said earlier about the impacts of trauma? Is a sense of shame about the self. In other words, your belief that you don't deserve love is a perfectly normal outcome of having been traumatized. That doesn't mean that it's healthy or that it's good for you, but it's normal. It's what happens to children that get traumatized. So there's nothing wrong with you. What you have is a normal response to abnormal circumstances. So recognize that this belief that I don't deserve love is actually an inevitable outcome of what happened to you. But that's all it is, it's a belief. Now, feelings I don't argue with. If you said to me, I'm tired, I wouldn't start arguing with you. No, you're not. Or I'm sleepy. No, you're not. I wouldn't do that. What's the point? But if you say, I don't believe I deserve love, well, I would start questioning you. Oh yeah, really? How about me? Do I deserve love? Oh, I do, but you don't? Well, that's interesting. Do you notice the double standard against yourself? You must have got that belief somewhere. As a matter of fact, the belief that you don't deserve love even had a protective value for you. This is the beauty of it all, or if you might say, the ugliness of it, but it's just the reality of it. Everything came along for a purpose, for a reason. Now, what would happen to a child who believed they deserved love and they kept demanding it from people that were incapable of giving it to them? What would happen to them? I mean, it'd be unbearable. So the belief that I'm not getting love because I don't deserve it is actually protective. It keeps you from a lot of frustration, a lot of rejection. So it came along, even this belief that I don't deserve love came along at some point to protect you.
That's beautiful.
So just learn to, you can get help with this, but there's nothing abnormal here. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. What we'd like to do next is to invite a few people to have the chance to ask some questions live. So I can see people have submitted questions on the Q&A, but I actually would like to ask you to raise your hands if you'd like to us to be able to turn on your camera and show up live on the call. And then we're only going to be able to select a few people, obviously, for time reasons. But if you would like to show up on the call, then just put your hand up. Oh, I have. Okay, I also have a message here from Ari from our team, and she mentioned that she would like to do the life exercise with you, if that's all right with you.
Okay, with me.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right. So then let's start. Well, Gabor, thank you very much for this wonderful insights that you have been sharing so far. And I got in touch with your work actually last year. And
Okay.
what changed a lot of how I was seeing trauma was what you have been mentioning so far about like that trauma is not what happened to us, but trauma is how we react towards what happened to us. But before, when we were talking about anger, I started thinking about something like when I was a child, I escaped the war with my parents. I was only 4-year-old, and
You're from Kosovo, right?
yes,
Yeah.
I'm from Kosovo.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, when I was 4, we had to, let's say, leave our home and escape, go away from Kosovo. We moved first to Albania as refugees and then to Italy. But let's say that I have somehow accepted, and I thought that I kind of healed this part of me that had to face all of that, what I thought always was just injustice. But when it comes to anger, it's very, very hard for me to still control it in certain situations. Like, no matter who I'm dealing with, if that person says something negative about Kosovo or says that, I don't know what was done to Kosovo, maybe there was a reason behind it and so on. It's like I wouldn't mind who is the person in front of me. Like I would react in a very angry way. So that's why when you mentioned before the exercise, I was like, I would love to just talk about that with you and share this with others.
Okay, so somebody says something negative about Kosovo, your place of birth, your homeland. Is that what happens? They say
Yes.
something negative. Okay.
Yeah.
And what might they say, for example?
Like, I don't want to go into politics and stuff like
No,
that, but
but
very simple, like just calling it, for example, Kosovo is not a country.
okay. Okay.
So
Yeah, and as you know, I was in Serbia just last year, and a lot of the Serbian people believe that Kosovo is a part of their country. You know. Okay. So somebody like that might say Kosovo is not a country. Whereas to the population of Kosovo, who are mostly Albanian in ethnic, that doesn't make any sense. Okay. So somebody says Kosovo is not a country. What do you feel?
I feel this kind of frustration and anger within me.
You feel anger? Anything else beside anger? Any hurt?
Yeah, I mean, from my side, I really just feel something in my stomach, like immediately when I hear this, like I feel something in my whole body going on physically and emotionally.
Okay, and so there's anger there. Would hurt be one of the things, or no? A sense of being hurt?
Yes.
Okay, so hurt and anger. So I'm gonna ask you a silly question, okay? What are you hurt and angry about?
It's an interesting one. It feels like something simple to answer, but for me, it just not doesn't feel right. It feels like this is an injustice if someone is telling to me,
Well,
okay, Kosovo is not.
injustice is not a feeling, it's an opinion, which may be a valid opinion, but it's not a feeling. Hurt and anger are the feelings. I'm asking you, what are you hurt and angry about? I'm not saying you shouldn't be. I'm just trying to see what it's about for you.
It's hard to put this into words, actually. Like,
Well, what do you make it mean?
it feels like somehow I cannot understand why I am angry and feeling hurt.
But you're
I
angry
just
about,
feel it.
but you're angry about something. Well, let me try something. Is it because they're dismissing you and validating you, but they don't see you? I mean, is that what it's about? Do you think? I'm not
Yes.
trying to say what it is.
No, absolutely. Like I think that when you mentioned the word invalidating me, something actually triggered me. So it feels like that.
Okay.
Like it feels like, yeah, I mean.
Okay. All right. So let's go with that. So that they're invalidating you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Which means they don't see your value. They don't see you. Yeah.
That's true.
Okay. No. So you think it's about you?
Actually, now, yes. Like
Yeah.
thinking
Obviously.
about it like
Yeah.
this, yes,
Yeah.
it's about
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. No. Could there be other reasons why they say what they're saying that has nothing to do with invalidating or not seeing you? That's not their intention at all. Could it be is that they have a different understanding of history than you do? Is that possible? I'm not making them right or you're wrong. I'm just saying, could they have a different interpretation of history?
That is possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very hard for me to say this, but now that we're talking about this, yes, that is possible.
But look what's going on in the world right now. Look what's happening in Gaza. And we're not going to go into the politics of it. But do you see how people are looking at the same thing and they have such totally different interpretations of it? Do you see that? Do you see that that happens all the time? Especially in Eastern Europe, when there have been these wars and conflicts forever. You know? Okay, now, if you understood that this person doesn't make them right, but if you understood that they have a different understanding of history and they're not trying to invalidate you or would you still be upset?
No.
You just say, you know, like look, you're wearing a white blouse, your partner there is wearing a black t-shirt. And if I said, I love your green blouse and your partner's pink t-shirt, what would you say to me? Would you be angry and upset?
No.
What would you think about me?
That you're seeing different colors.
Yeah, and or maybe I'm colorblind, right?
Yes,
Would you be angry with me for being colorblind?
absolutely not.
Okay, let me answer this question. This feeling that you describe in your body, in your gut, and so on. How familiar is that feeling to you? Does it start recently, or have you had it for a long time?
I've had it forever. Like forever. I mean, since I can remember, since I was 4-year-old, I feel
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. And that had nothing to do with anybody saying it about Kosovo, did it? It had to do with the people that should have seen you and validate you, which is your parents, not seeing you and validating you. And I'm not blaming them. They had their own problems. I'm not attacking them, but I'm saying that's what happened, right? That's what's showing up. That's what's showing up right now. So I don't have to know anything about your personal history, but I can tell you, you were not seen and validated as a child. And that really hurt you. Fair enough? Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
One more, then there's one more, there's another layer here, okay?
Thank you very much.
But there's one more thing. I'm not letting you off the hook yet, okay? There's one more thing here.
Yes, let's continue.
Not so fast. Okay, there's one more thing here. Okay. What if you believed that you're perfectly valid and absolutely worthy and deserving of nothing but respect? What if you believed that yourself? Then would what I say to you make any difference?
No,
So who's the one that is invalidating you?
I'm doing that to myself.
You're doing it to yourself, okay? Now that's not your fault. That goes back to the original wound, okay? But that's the good news. The more you can learn to validate yourself, the less you're going to be triggered when somebody else says something like that. Okay?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you very much. That was really amazing.
Huh.
I have been thinking of this for ages, and I mean, seeing that actually such simple questions could redirect me to just see things from a completely different perspective was just amazing. Thank you, Gabor.
Well, thank you, and for being so open with your issue. What I did is a part of the healing method that I've helped to develop. It's called compassionate inquiry, and you can see that's all I did is ask you a bunch of questions. I hope compassionately, because I think the truth is inside everybody. So if we can be compassionate and ask the right questions, the truth will emerge. And it's not that complicated. It's very simple, actually. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Well, Patricia, I think you can continue. Maybe we have somebody else who wants to ask a few questions.
Yes, so we'll be inviting some people to come live. So I'm just checking if we have anyone yet. Okay, just bear with me just 1 minute. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
For all those people who have raised their hand, please check your Zoom because you will be receiving a notification that you're asked to join the call and you need to accept it. So please make sure that you're checking the notifications that you're receiving.
Thank you.
In the meantime, Patricia, if you want, we can read one of the questions that we have in the Q&A. Or maybe
Yes, we'll do that
through.
because we also received many questions on the Q&A. So I can go through one of them. So, okay, so we have a question. How do you support children who are going through trauma currently, living in a volatile household, abuse at home?
Yeah, I'm coming there in a moment. Just one quick, I just noticed something in the chat line and I can't possibly address the many great questions in the chat line, but one of them says, how do you change deep-seated beliefs? Okay. You don't change them. You understand them. You remember I was talking about the belief that somebody wasn't deserving of love? You don't change the belief. The belief came along for a reason. You understand where it came from. And you actually, once you understand where it came from, you don't have to change it. It'll lose its power. So don't work so hard, people, at trying to change stuff in yourself. Work on understanding yourself. Work on accepting yourself. Those beliefs came along for a reason. You're not stupid. You weren't making a mistake. those beliefs arose for a purpose. And the thing is just to understand them. They will automatically change. Okay? All right. Somebody wants to talk to me?
Yes, we already have some people here live. So, Pia, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. My name is Pia and I live in Sweden. And I have a question, as my both parents survived the Holocaust and I'm a second generation.
Yeah.
So my mom was a teenager when she lost her mother, and I had to mothering her very much. And because of that, I was very young. I have still projections on different kind of situations in life. It can be any kind of situation, but it has to do with that root that I was not mothered myself. I healed a lot in that with therapists and so, but still it is something that has to do in situation that is very important for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. What is the word you keep using? What is important for you?
It could be job, it could be love life, it could be relationships.
Okay, and what's going on in these areas for you? I'm trying to understand what's happening.
What is happening is that it is some kind of sabotage.
You think you're sabotaging yourself? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Can you give me an example? And by the way, is it possible for you to adjust your camera so we can see your whole face? That's a little bit better, a little bit more. Yes, now we can see you. Thank you. That makes a big difference. Okay.
Yeah.
Give me an example of how you sabotage yourself, Pia.
It is in a way, or it was in a way that I was not aware that I was sabotaging myself, but it is like I'm not good enough. I'm not making my parents satisfied with what I'm doing. So I'm over ambitious. I'm studied, I did a lot of things, but still I'm not good enough. Now they're dead for ages, but it is still something that I'm not good enough. I'm not seen.
Okay, so first of all, you have this belief, this fixed belief, that doesn't matter what you do and how well you do it and how much you do it and what you achieve, you're not good enough, right?
Yeah.
And that's your belief. Now, and you're calling that self-sabotage, okay? Well, first of all, it isn't self-sabotage. It isn't. You don't wake up in the morning and say, how will I sabotage myself today? Oh,
No.
No. It's an automatic ingrained process in your mind, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So you're not doing it, are you? It's doing itself.
No, it is something that is programmed in me that
Yeah, okay, well then you're not doing it. So
no, I'm not myself. It is programmed.
Very good. Well, then drop the idea that you're sabotaging yourself.
Okay.
Because that's just another way to beat yourself up. So stop beating yourself up for something that you're not doing. Okay. It's just a machine in your brain. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, it's very common what you're going through. A lot of people, they get famous, they get very successful, they get very wealthy, whatever, and they still don't believe they're good enough. They have to keep working harder and harder to keep proving themselves that they're good. And it doesn't matter how hard they work, they will never prove to themselves that they're good enough, because the idea or the belief that I'm not good enough has nothing to do with what you did or didn't do or will ever do or didn't do. What do you think it has to do with?
I think it is a projection from my parents that they are not good enough.
But in what sense? It is, but you have to understand it specifically. In what sense? How did your parents give you that or transmit to you that belief that you're not good enough?
Because they didn't do what they wanted to do, and they want to push me, so I will do that, and therefore.
So you think it was the pushing that they did?
Pushing, maybe.
I don't think so.
No.
I think it goes deeper than that. Because if it was only the pushing, then at some point as an adult, you could have said enough already. But there was a deep sense, Pia, in which you completely failed. Completely failed. And were completely not good enough. Can I tell you what that was?
Yes, please.
You could not make them happy.
Oh, that's right. Mm.
You could not heal their wounds.
I tried, but I couldn't. No. Mm.
Yeah. But as a child, you took that on.
Yeah.
And you think as long as I keep doing something and better, then maybe, you know what you need to accept is your complete failure. And when I say failure, I mean in quotation marks, because it never should have been your job in the first place.
No.
No, I'm not blaming your parents, but that's what they did. And
I try to forgive them. I try to forgive them, but I still have this in me, you know, so I healed a lot, but still it is something in me.
Okay, so then the next time this belief shows up in you that you're not good enough, there's a number of ways you could deal with it. One of them is to get a better job or get a better relationship or change your hair color. I mean, I don't know, whatever, you know, get a new dress, you know, you could do that. Okay. But you know what the result will be? Nothing. So you could do that, but you've already done that a million times. Or you could say to yourself, kid, this belief that you're not good enough, naturally you believe that given what happened to you. Now relax a little bit. What I'm saying to you is take care of that child inside you.
Yeah.
What would you say to a 5-year-old who had this belief that they're not good enough? What would you say to a 5-year-old?
I would mother her and say that she's good. She's good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is what I'm trying to do with myself also when I'm logical. But when my feelings are coming like that, I cannot control it. It is something.
Well, that's okay. You know, then it's going to keep coming up because it's like a habit. It's almost like you're addicted to it, you know? And so it's going to keep coming up and coming up. And every time it does, as soon as you catch yourself, sit down and talk to it. Or phone somebody, either a therapist or a friend, and say, I'm having one of these, I'm not good enough attacks again. But first of all, accept that it's perfectly natural. Secondly, understand that it has nothing to do with what you ever did or didn't do. It has to do with what you could never have done, which is to save your parents from their own suffering. And stop telling yourself that you're sabotaging yourself. You're not. You're not even doing it. That's what I can tell you in a short session, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you, Gabor. We have a couple more people to ask live questions, if that's okay with you.
It's fine.
So I'm going to be calling Aisha.
Hi.
Hello. Morning. Oh, sorry, not morning. I'm in Australia. It's morning here.
Afternoon here in Vancouver, but go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to ask about, I am a psychology 4th year graduate. I feel like I've tried quite hard to, kind of understand myself and get a better picture of my own trauma and work towards my own healing through both theoretical and a practical sense. And my question is about how, just, I guess I know I'm working towards it, but I just wanted to ask, a lot of people in the field talk about, self-inquiry. You discuss it as compassionate self-inquiry. And I wanted to ask, what does that mean? Does that mean kind of, I know you talk about, understanding your own beliefs and where they're coming from and how you got them and what the trauma is. And, I guess something that I didn't really realize was that healing means changing, or I know you say not changing those beliefs, but understanding where they're from. And I guess what I've tried to work towards is kind of, yes, changing those beliefs because they're not working for me.
Aisha, let me interrupt, okay?
Yeah.
What you're asking sounds somewhat theoretical to me, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
I don't want to get into theory.
Okay, fair enough.
But I would like to help you. So tell me something that you're dealing with that you want help with, okay?
Okay. I have these feelings similar to other people in the call, unworthiness, not feeling good enough, helplessness.
Okay.
And they have stemmed from my early childhood trauma, and my mum had a partner who was abusive, and I did, see some of it. And
so let's just stop again, okay? You're dealing with this belief that you're not good enough, right?
Yeah.
How does that show up in your life?
Recently, I've gotten really frustrated when people reinforce that belief and say things that are.
You mean when somebody says something critical to you? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to check in with yourself right now, this very moment, okay? And tell me, are you good enough right now or not?
Yes.
You sure?
No.
Well, then don't lie to me. Check in with yourself, okay? Really check it, not with your head. Your head is way too active, okay?
Yeah.
Check in with your body, okay? What's in your heart, your belly, your chest, your throat? Are you good enough? Yes or no? Right now.
Say yes.
Yeah? Well, if there's goodness there, tell me what it feels like.
Feels like community coming together, helping each other, listening to each other, supporting each other.
No. That's not a feeling.
In my own body.
That's
right.
that's an observation.
Okay.
What's happening in your body?
Okay. It's interesting how much this has come up. People are saying things that are not feelings, and yeah, I would say.
But look, you're one of these people. I totally understand you because I've been through it myself. There was a therapist that once said to me that if your parents don't know how to hold you, you develop the mind to hold yourself with.
Mm-hmm.
So you develop this very acute mind that tries to figure everything out up here. Okay.
Right.
But I got news for you. It won't. Okay. So that's why I keep saying, let's come back to your body. If you really believe you're good enough, tell me what's going on in your body.
I feel supported. Is that feeling? And
oh, that's a perception.
okay.
What's the feeling? What's the feeling when you're supported?
Appreciated, somewhat validated.
That's not a feeling. Those may be accurate, but they're not feelings, they're perceptions. They have to do not with you, but with me. They have to do with what I'm doing. But I'm not asking you what I'm doing. I'm asking you what you're feeling. Okay. Now notice how difficult it is for you to be in touch with your body. Do you see that? I'm not blaming you for it. There's a good reason why you're disconnected. But there's a big disconnect with your body.
Right.
As long as that disconnect persists, you're never going to feel good enough.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Not your fault. That disconnect came along to protect you from pain.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with
Okay.
you. There's nothing wrong
Yep.
with you.
Yep.
But there's a defense against feeling pain, which is this disconnection. That's why it's taken me 10 minutes now, and I still haven't got a single feeling out of you. Okay.
Yep.
So let me ask you again, if you can, just check in with your body right now. And you don't owe me any answer. We're just investigating. We're not
Okay.
We're not expecting anything, okay?
Yep. Okay. Feel somewhat peaceful, at
So there's some peace there.
relaxed.
Okay.
Yep.
In your body?
Yep.
Okay. Well, that relaxation is good enough, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. In other words, the route to your sense of being good enough is through your body.
Right.
It's not
So
through,
would you say, yeah, it's not through the mind? Yeah.
it's not through the intellect. In your case, it's not through the intellect, it's through the body. Okay.
My case. Okay.
So that's why you need to do the work. Okay. But
Thank you
again,
so
there's
much.
nothing
Very,
again, there's
yeah.
not again, there's nothing wrong. There's just a natural defense that came along at some point to protect you. But it's
Okay.
no longer
Yeah.
but it's no longer working for you.
Yeah, yeah, right. Okay.
Okay.
I'm very
Now,
grateful. Thank you so much.
yeah, and if you're a psychology graduate, you might want to consider checking out my compassionate inquiry course. Okay.
Okay.
It's online. A lot of people from Australia have taken it. I'm not saying you should do it. It's just an option for you.
Yep. Thank
Okay?
you.
Because you do a
Thanks.
lot of work on yourself when you take that course.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
for sure.
it's for professionals. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Thank you, Gabor. Thank you, Aisha. We have one more person here that would like to submit a question, Victoria, but I don't know if you still have time for this question. Will that be okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. All right, go ahead, Victoria.
Hi. I was like trying to word out, figure out how to word this question to kind of make it as brief as possible. So I actually work in the field as well. And I've been struggling with my mental health for many years. I've had several diagnoses over the years. And just trying so hard to get a clear understanding of what it is I'm dealing with. Struggling to really manage it and get better. I'm starting to understand that diagnoses are kind of like a man-made framework that are supposed to help organize symptoms and guide treatment. But, so I guess my question is two-part. Like, do you think that we should get rid of diagnoses? And then how do you recommend navigating this kind of system in order to better understand yourself and get the right support?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. Diagnoses are useful up to a point. I mean, but the big mistake that we make is that we think they explain anything. They don't explain anything. They describe things.
Mm-hmm.
The description is not an explanation.
Right.
If I described, the room behind you with a fan on the ceiling and some pictures on the wall, I would be describing it accurately. I'd say this is a white painted room with some fixtures on the wall and a fan in the ceiling, but I wouldn't explain how it got there or what it all means. I would just describe them. So, Victoria, give me one of your diagnoses that you've had, just any one of them that you want to share, just any one.
Well, I mean, so I've had depression, anxiety,
Okay,
OCD.
let's deal with depression, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just take one of them. So we say Victoria, by the way, I've had that myself, okay? So Victoria's depressed. How do we know? Because she feels flat and she is sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, or eating too much or not eating enough, and she's socially isolating. And she feels down all the time, right? Why is she feeling all those things? Why is she feeling down? Why is she isolating, etc.? Because she's depressed. How do we know she's depressed? Because she's feeling down all the time and is socially isolating and is sleeping too much. Why is she sleeping too much, and why is she socially isolating, and why is she down? Because she's depressed. How do we know she's depressed? You see, I could go on like this the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the OCD. How do you know we have, why is Victoria washing her hands 99 times before she leaves the house? Because she's got OCD. How do we know she's got OCD? Because she washes her hands 99 times. These don't explain anything.
Mm-hmm.
They describe things. Now, it may be helpful to describe things, as you said, as some degree of guide to treatment. The big problem is we mistake the person for the diagnosis. Because actually who you are is you develop these patterns for damn good reasons. Like depression, it means to push something down. What gets pushed on in depression? What do you think gets pushed on in depression?
I mean,
Hmm?
so many things. It seems, in my understanding, or my developing understanding, is that it's a suppressed nervous system.
Well, and why would somebody suppress the nervous system?
Because of trauma, pain.
Because it hurts too much.
Mm-hmm.
So the depression, the diagnosis doesn't explain anything. What explains it is something happened in your life where you had to really push down your emotions to protect yourself because you couldn't afford to feel them and to express them. That's what happened.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we talked about your childhood, that's what would show up. The OCD, I'm not going to go into it, but it's just another way of escaping from pain. So that whatever the diagnosis, if we don't deal with the original causes, the wounds that you're still carrying, you're just trying to deal with the manifestations or the symptoms of whichever diagnosis, where you're just dealing on the surface. So so in response to your question, it's not so much that we need to get rid of diagnoses, but I mean, on the whole, if you came to me, I wouldn't be that interested in the diagnosis. I'd be interested in what's working in your life and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so diagnoses can be helpful, but they're not nearly enough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your second question was a broader one, which is how do we negotiate the healthcare system? Is that what the question is? How do you know?
Navigating it, yeah. Because the frustration is like, I think, they're like, oh, the depression, the anxiety is explaining, the symptoms. Oh, now it's OCD, now it's ADHD. Oh, you might have BPD. Like, it's just like,
or you might have all of them, and or you might show features. It's very common for people to have multiple diagnoses,
mm-hmm.
depending on who takes the history and what they emphasize or what you're feeling that day.
Yeah.
The point is, none of them explain anything. They describe things. What you're telling me is that you've had complex trauma as a child, and that trauma affected your brain and your nervous system in certain ways, and that can be healed. But it would take somebody who understood all that to work with you.
Right, and I can't get anyone to validate that.
Can you afford therapy on your own, or do you have to go to the government-sponsored healthcare?
At the moment, I can't afford to pay out of pocket, but I mean, if I can find the right provider that understands, like, I'm willing to make it happen,
Did you say you can or cannot afford it?
Well, at the moment, I'm not working, but once I start working, I'm willing to make it happen as long as I know that I'm not wasting my money and my time, finding.
All right. So let me just, offer you something, okay? So I've trained people in this compassion inquiry in Australia. Is that what you said you were?
No, I'm in California, United States.
Oh, sorry, you're in California. Okay. So I've trained people in compassionate inquiry. Some of them are in California. Some, let's give you a scholarship for a couple of months to work with somebody.
Oh my God, that would be incredible.
And I'm not guaranteeing anything. I mean, I have no idea. Just because I train them doesn't mean they're any good. Okay. But at least they have a certain perspective, a certain way of understand things.
Yeah.
So through the organizer of this event, and I'm not offering this to everybody on the call. You're the last caller, so I'm just, so I'm going to just offer this to you.
Thank you so much.
Get in touch with me through the organizers, through Unity, and then we'll make it happen. Okay.
Okay.
We'll ask you to pay a certain minimal amount per session, whatever you can afford, and the rest we'll give you on scholarship. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.